Thank you, Matthew. So yeah, I'm here today to talk about digital analytics and online reputation management. The main area I want to cover, though, is the theme of measurement, which I think has been the case for most of the talks today. Nearly every session has mentioned measurement in one way or another, and for me this quote sums it up quite nicely. So if you're not measuring what you're doing, really you're just going to be another person with an opinion. So it's about making sure you're measuring what's happening on your website and with your online marketing to see what's working for you. So to start off with, I'd like to talk about creating a measurement plan, which is really the foundation of any kind of measurement that you do on your website. And a measurement plan is a document that translates your objectives into things that you can measure on your website. It's also a framework for customized configuration of your web analytics packages, and it forms a vital part of your wider digital marketing strategy. Before you start creating your measurement plan, you should have a good understanding of your objectives and strategy for your school, college or university, a good understanding of website analytics, and also good technical knowledge to help set up any custom configuration you might need. Now, this doesn't have to be one person with all this knowledge, it doesn't have to be yourself, it can be a group of people at your institution all coming together when you first devise the measurement plan. So, where do we start? Well, step one is around defining your objectives, and objectives again will be mentioned in quite a few of the talks throughout the day. So I won't go into huge detail here, but as Steve mentioned and others have mentioned before, it will vary depending on your institution, particularly if you're different age groups that you're targeting. And it's things like increasing awareness of your school, college or university, increasing the number of enrolments, keeping students, parents and key influencers updated on news, such as what's going on at your school, perhaps your term times, that kind of thing. And it can also be something as broad as building a positive brand, so making sure that people actually, when they talk about your school, they talk about it in a positive way. Second step is to define your KPIs, or key performance indicators. And here's an example from the beginnings of a measurement plan. We can see the objective here is to increase overall awareness, and the KPIs would be things like increasing the visibility of the website, so making sure it's appearing on the search engines, that people can get to it easily, and also something like increasing engagement. Again, something else that people have talked about before, things like time on site and how many pages people are looking at when they actually come to your website. Step 3 is to add in some metrics and the numbers of things that you're going to measure. And we can see the measurement plan starting to take shape here. So in the case of increasing awareness, we can look at things like, for increased visibility, we're looking at overall visits to the website, but also visits from certain channels perhaps, so visits from social media or from organic search. In terms of engagement, as I touched on before, it will be more likely things like the amount of time people are spending on your site, the number of page views, and also people completing contact forms, that kind of thing. On the side here for enrolments, we've got a whole different type of KPI and a whole different type of metric. So increasing school visits can be, again, people booking a school visit through your site if that's possible, or booking on an open day event. So I won't go into all the detail here, but you can see how these things are taking shape, and I'm sure some of you will have ideas already about how you might fill this in for your institution. Step number 4 is to add in different audiences, which obviously ties in what Steve was saying just now, that you're going to have different audiences for your website. And these audiences sit above your objectives and really give you an idea of how you're going to target these individual groups. So this example is particularly for a school website, but of course if it's a university then you have mainly student-related goals rather than parents. And the audience here, so for increasing awareness and enrolments, you're really going to be focusing primarily on parents who are looking for a school, so prospective parents. Whereas if you're looking at updates, keeping people updated, then that's really going to be parents of existing pupils. So people who are at your school already, you want to keep them updated on things like term times, for example. And the final step of creating a measurement plan is to then plan the implementation. So you want to consider which tools you're going to use to measure these metrics. We'll come on to some of that in the next section. You also want to set up any additional tracking that's required and test and review that tracking to make sure it's working as you'd expect. You can also consider your reporting options. So how are you going to be reporting back to your broader team, perhaps to governors, to the board, that kind of thing. So really it's about making sure that not only are you measuring these things, but actually you're reporting back and then acting on them as well. And the final point is you can download a measurement plan template from this URL here, which is, for those who can't read it, tinyurl.com/measurement plan. I think Matthew will be sending that round afterwards as well. But this will give you a blank template that you can then start to fill in for your institution. So once you've got your measurement plan in place, you really should be using your analytics packages to do more. Now, this is something that we can talk about, or I can talk about all day. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to very quickly run through some key points of analytics and really where to get started. So I think the main point is that analytics can be daunting, particularly for busy people. We're all busy in this room. We've all got lots in our jobs, and we don't necessarily have time to continually be in an analytics package looking at the data there. So I'm just going to run over some very quick starting points and some time-saving tips, as well as a couple of advanced tracking options as well. The first tip is to use Google Analytics. Can I just ask quickly, who here uses Google Analytics? Okay, that's most people. Who uses it regularly? Okay, that's not quite as many people. So Google Analytics I'd recommend as the starting point for your measurement. It's because it's very easy to set up. It's used on over 10 million websites worldwide, which means it's well supported. So if you've got a question, something you want to do in Google Analytics, you can normally just do a search and find an answer out there. It's fully customizable to your needs as well. So you can set up your own goals and events and tracking to set it up so it's working and giving you the data that you need to see. And perhaps most importantly of all, for some of us with smaller budgets, it's completely free, and you do get a lot of functionality for no money at all. And Google Analytics is split into 4 main types of reports. So you've got audience reports, which are about the people who come to your website. Are they using a desktop, laptop, mobile, that kind of thing? Where do they come from geographically? There's also demographic reports available now, where you can find out people's ages and genders, languages they speak, that kind of thing. So you can get a lot of information about your audience, your users, your parents, your students, all from within the analytics package. The next series of reports around behaviour. So what are they doing when they're on your website? Which pages are they looking at? How long are they staying? How are they navigating through the site as well? Third set of reports is around acquisition. So this is how they found your website. Did they come through social media links? Did they come through a search on Google? How did they come to be on your website? And this is a great way of reporting back on your marketing campaigns and seeing what's working and what isn't. The final series of reports around conversions, which relate to the number of goals that people are completing on your website, and we'll come on to that in a couple of slides' time. In your reports, there's a lot of metrics. The basic ones to look out for to begin with, really, though, are things like sessions, which is the number of visits that you'll be getting. That's a headline figure that sometimes people will focus on too much, but it's important to know whether that's going up and down and how many people are coming to your site, but it's only really the starting point. Then you want to look at page views, so the number of pages that people are looking at, and then you can work out the pages per session, which is the average number of page views per session. So the average number of pages people look at when they come to your website will give you an idea about how engaged they are. As will the next one, the time on site. Again, if people are spending a long time on your website, they could be engaged with your content, they could be finding it interesting, which is a good sign. And then bounce rate, again, that's been mentioned before in a couple of talks, and that really simply, in terms of Google Analytics at least, there's other definitions of it, but the way it's calculating Google Analytics is the percentage of people viewing only one page before leaving your website. So in the case of analytics, it doesn't matter how long they stay on your site or what they do, it's just that they only view one page before leaving to go to another website or to close their browser completely. Spoke about goals before, and goals are simply a notable action taken by someone on your website. And example goals for education websites are things like downloading a prospectus, booking for an open day, submitting a contact form, online course applications, particularly in the case of universities or FE sites, login to parent or student-only areas. If you've got a login area on your website, you might want to track whether people are actually using it. And things like subscriptions to your school newsletter as well. And all of these goals can be tracked with a bit of code in your analytics, and it can show you what people are actually doing when they're on your website. So a tip for those of us who don't have a lot of time to spend in analytics is to create a dashboard. And dashboards are really a series of individual reports all pulled into one big report. You can have up to 12 different reports here on a dashboard like this, and they can all be pulled into one place to save you having to navigate to lots of different reports. at one go. Another time saver is to get reports emailed to yourself. So rather than logging into Google Analytics every day, you might want to get individual reports sent to you. And you can do this, as we can see here, at various frequencies. You can do it on a daily, weekly or monthly basis. And again, this just means you'll get sent the information. It's a reminder that this is happening on your website and you don't forget to look at your analytics at all. And also it's useful because it saves you having to log in every time. And then finally, in terms of analytics, I just want to touch on very briefly a few perhaps slightly more advanced tracking ideas. So the first one is that ideally you should be tagging links within any emails you send out to track on-site activity from people coming from your email campaigns. Now, tools like MailChimp will be able to tell you who's opened your email, but it won't be able to tell you whether they've gone on to complete a goal on your website or whether they spent 5 minutes on your website, for example. So if you tie the two together, you'll be able to get a much better idea of whether your email campaigns are working or not. You can also use bespoke URLs to track your offline advertising, so things like billboards or posters or even in magazines. If you set up a URL in there, a bespoke kind of web address if you like, then when people type that in, you can see that in your analytics and begin to start to monitor some of your offline advertising. Other things you can do using analytics and Google in general is remarket to people. We've all been to websites looking at a product and then been on other websites and that product keeps popping up, perhaps even after we bought it. So you need to be careful about how you do that and that you're not remarketing too aggressively, but it can be a good way of reminding people who came to your school site to come back at a later date. And then finally, really, and quite a key point, we should be using Google Analytics to at least begin to measure the return on investment from any paid online advertising. So again, looking at those acquisition reports to find out what's working and what isn't. There are other analytics tools available too. So we've got YouTube Analytics in the top there, which will tell you about people watching your videos. You've got Twitter Analytics and Facebook Insights. Again, really good for telling you about whether people are engaging with you on social media. And down the bottom here, we've got a report from MailChimp, which tells us things like how many people have opened the emails that we've sent out. Information that you can't get from Google Analytics, but is very useful, and you should keep an eye on that too. Final thing I want to cover today, so it's nearly time to go to the pub, is keeping track of your online reputation. And you can split down your media into three areas, really. There's your owned media, which is your own website, your own social media channels. There's your paid media, which is promoted posts on social networks, perhaps pay-per-click advertising or any other kind of paid advertising. And then there's this third area here, which is this earned media, which people don't really focus on as much as the other two. The other two, you've got very good control over normally, whereas this third earned media, you don't so much. So really it's about what others are saying about your institution online. Are people saying good or bad things about your school, college or university, and are you even aware of that? So this is a bit of an example about what I mean. It's a post on Mumsnet. It's someone asking whether they should send their child to a particular school. Things like this happen every day, but you should really be aware of this. You know, the people from this school may not have seen this post at all, yet people are talking about them. And there's three different ways that you can keep track of this kind of thing. Number one is Google Alerts. It's the simplest and it's another free tool. Really simple to set up, takes about 30 seconds, so if you wanted to, you could go back to your school on Monday and set something like this up. In this example here, I've just put my school name, which is called Luke's School, but obviously you can put your own school name in there, or also the name of perhaps key members of staff or events and things that you're running. And then you'll be alerted any time that those words are mentioned online. And you'll just get sent an email from Google telling you where you've been mentioned and linking through to it. Second type of tool I want to talk about briefly is sort of social media management tools. And I think Matthew touched on Hootsuite earlier. And you can do things here like manage multiple social networks in one place. You can schedule your tweets and messages, and you can track brand mentions, so mentions of, again, your school or key members of staff or whatever that might be. And here's what Hootsuite can look like. So we've got these 4 columns, otherwise known as streams. In the one over here, we've got a search for a school name, a local school, Blatchington Mill. So anytime that's mentioned on Twitter, the tweets will appear in this first column here. Second one is the official Twitter account for Blatchington Mill, so anything they tweet out will appear here. And then we've got one for Brighton Schools, so if any tweets with the words Brighton Schools in would appear here. And the same for the last column, but that's Facebook rather than Twitter. So any open Facebook groups, any public groups, if the words Brighton and school are mentioned in them, then they will appear in that column. And it's a good way to keep track of what people are saying. Final tool I want to cover is around social media management and monitoring. So Brandwatch is an enterprise level tool. Again, I'm using Brandwatch as an example. I don't work for them, but it's just the tool that I'm most familiar with. I'm just going to run through a few examples of what you can do with a tool like Brandwatch. This is a school called the Academy, and this is a mention cloud, which is one of the reports that appears in Brandwatch. And you can see from here the kind of thing that was being talked about around this time. It was an incident, as we've seen many times, and indeed quite recently, of students being sent home for wearing the wrong uniform. They've come in after half term or after holiday and been sent home because the schools cracked down on their uniform policy. And we can see an idea about what's being spoken about here. And we can see other things as well, such as two names, the name of the head teacher down there, and up the top, the name of a pupil who was quoted in some of the news articles too. And if you click on these, we can actually see the mentions that relate to, in this case, the head of the school, for example. And this is what it looks like on a timeline. So this is the same school, the same story. We can see throughout October, there was just occasional mentions of the school. And on the 5th of November, when everyone was sent home for wearing the wrong uniform, there was a big spike in mentions, predominantly on Twitter to begin with, and then the following day on news websites. And that's how things tend to happen. News breaks on Twitter, there's a lot of interest there, and then when there's time to sort of consider and give opinion pieces and things, then the news websites will step in on the following day. There's also, you'll notice, a small spike on the 11th of November, and that all relates to a tweet that was sent out by the MP Dennis Skinner, who compared what David Cameron was wearing to a dinner to the uniform of the school that was the Hanston Academy there. And you can see that tweet was sent out, one tweet, got retweeted, got mentioned, and then the story bubbles up again. So it's the idea that if there is a story and you think it's died down, in actual fact, things can happen to prolong that and make it another headline. And it's a similar case for Stonyhurst College, where a teenage couple ran away to the Dominican Republic, and this was a big story in the news. It died down, but then there was some hashtags that were used by other students at the school, and the story spiraled again. It snowballed effectively, and again, it's another big story when things seem to be dying down. And there's an ongoing impact of this. So this is the search results. We can see here, high up on the search results, the story about the teen runaways there is appearing quite high. So there can actually be almost permanent damage from these kind of stories. Another area you might want to look for in your social media management tool is sentiment. So sentiment is all about computers effectively trying to work out whether the mentions are positive or negative or neutral. So this is for another local school, and we can see they've got quite a few positive mentions, but a small amount, 2% of negative mentions. And again, you can click on that and find out what those negative mentions are. So are they truly negative or not? One thing to bear in mind here is it is all analysed by computers, and computers don't really get sarcasm. So it may well be that they're missing the point there and getting things wrong. So it's always good just to check that kind of thing. As with some of the other tools, you can keep updated by email, so you can get alerts sent to you. And if you do see negative comments online, you've really got four main options. There are possibly other course of actions to take, but the main ones are you could ignore them. So if someone's saying something bad about your school, it may be a good idea to ignore it. They may have 5 followers on Twitter and perhaps no one's seen it, and by replying to it yourself, you're actually inflaming the situation and getting more people involved. You may also, as well as amplifying it, may lead to arguments and things. So sometimes you're best off ignoring comments. If comments are made on your owned media, so on your Facebook page, for example, you can potentially delete them. And this is absolutely fine to do, but be careful that you can't censor everything. And if you delete too much, then people may start to reply, and actually you may start to get more negative comments as you go. So if you do delete things, it's important that you have a clear policy statement. So for example, if there's swearing, if you've got a school website and there's swearing on your Facebook page, you can't really have that. And you need to point people towards your policy statement and say, sorry, I have to remove this because it broke our guidelines. And also in that kind of instance, if it's one individual, you might want to contact them offline as well and try and take the conversation offline so you're not having that discussion in public. The third option is to comment back, so reply to these negative comments. And that's great, and you need to be making sure that you're being polite and factual. Again, risk possibly getting into an argument there, but sometimes it's the best way to go, particularly if someone is purely getting their facts wrong or there's been a misunderstanding. Final option can be the most powerful, and that's to call for backup. So instead of replying yourself, you might want parents or other students of your university to reply on your behalf. They're going to be less biased and perhaps have a bit more authority than you in terms of giving their side of the story. And when I talk about influencers, I mean people who are highly respected online. They always have a lot of followers and fans. Their opinions matter, and they can influence other people's opinions too, and actually change their opinions at times. And they can be great allies for your school, college, or university. And when it comes to identifying influencers, you want to look at things like their profile or bio info. So are they someone who's local to your institution? Are they someone who is going to be listened to sort of in the education sector, for example? Do they mention words like, say, education or schools or other words that are relevant to your website in their bio? The number of followers, fans and likes they have obviously gives a sign of their popularity, and also the ratio of that too. You want to make sure that someone, maybe a follower or has a big following rather than is a follower. Also their post frequency. Are they posting every 5 minutes, in which case they're probably just making a lot of noise, or are they posting once a year, in which case they're not really going to be listened to? And things like verified accounts on Twitter, so that the blue tick you get next to someone's name to show that they are a genuine person. Things like Clout Score as well, so that's a score that's developed purely to measure influence, and also where their website and blog appears in the search engines. Are they appearing high up for terms that are relevant to your school? So that's about it from me. Just to summarise, the first thing I recommend doing is to create a measurement plan. So you can use the template that I mentioned before to get started. Think about your objectives and KPIs and how you're actually going to measure and report against those. Second step is to embrace analytics. I know not everyone's a massive Google Analytics fan, but try and find ways to use it that are efficient to you. Set up dashboards and custom reports, get reports emailed to yourself too, so you're keeping track of everything there. And then finally, to monitor your reputation online. So even if that's just starting by setting up Google Alerts, you can set those up and just have a better idea about what's being said about your institution online. Thank you.